I have a confession to make. I've been an OKC Thunder doubter for some time now. I mean, this team has had some of the best star cores in NBA history, and what do they have to show for it? Absolutely nothing. So obviously, when this team blew it up and went into the biggest NBA rebuild of all time, snagging over 20 first-round draft picks over the next 10 years, I and many other fans were skeptical to say the least. But now, it's looking like all those people were wrong. The Thunder are now at the top of the West, only behind the Timberwolves, and this team looks absolutely special.
Has to find somebody, finds Holmgren, the turnaround shot to tie it, and Chet Holmgren with the three, and the buzzer ties it.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that this young Thunder team is about to shock everyone. But behind the fast rebuild and great success is a massive problem for this team. One that could blow this entire rebuild up if they don't make the right decision. Now, you're probably thinking, how could one of the best young teams in the NBA have any problems? I mean, OKC has an MVP caliber player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, likely Rookie of the Year in Chet Holmgren, and much more young talent. Well, to answer that question, we have to go back to when this whole thing started. During the summer of 2019, it was very apparent that things just weren't working out in OKC. Sure, they had great, even MVP caliber talent in Westbrook and Paul George, but this team just could not win at the highest level. But unlike most general managers who at this point would have held onto their core, Sam Presti took a very different approach, trading stars Westbrook and George to contending teams, and in return receiving a plethora of picks and young talent, including this one guy on the Clippers named Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Between all the moves that this team made, at one point they had acquired over 20 first-round draft picks, including their own, which is unheard of in the NBA. In the upcoming draft alone, OKC will likely have 4 first-round picks, which leads us to this team's big problem. They have way too many assets. This team already has a very deep roster filled with young talent, so bringing on 4 more players from this year's draft alone just isn't realistic. However, although all these assets are currently the Thunder's biggest problem, it's actually their key to becoming the next NBA dynasty. The Thunder are currently in the position that most general managers could only dream of. They have one of the best records in the NBA, and they have a ton of assets at their disposal to upgrade their roster and become championship favorites. They won't realistically be able to use all 4 of their first round picks this year, so how do they move on and become championship favorites? Even though championship favorites is a bold statement, it is possible for this team to become just that before the trade deadline, if they fix their 2 biggest roster issues. As of right now, the Thunder have a start of Shai, Carson Wallace, Josh Giddey, J-Dub, and Chet. Now, this 5 hasn't been bad. In fact, they have been more than solid. But if you've been watching Thunder games, you would know that this team has 2 big issues. One, Josh Giddey doesn't fit well with the starting lineup. Sure, the man is a great playmaker and a half-decent defender, but with Shai running the offense, there's really no need for Giddey. And this team would be much better with a 3-and-D wing that could guard against the opposing team's best player. OKC already has some of the best interior defense with Chet holding down the paint. So if they elevated their defense even a little bit on the perimeter, it could put them over the top and make them championship favorites. The key metric to look at to see if a team is a true championship contender is their offensive and defensive rating. History continues to show that a championship team almost always needs a top 10 defense and offense in order to win it all. And lucky for the Thunder, there are only 3 teams in the NBA right now that are top 10 in both. The Celtics, obviously, the Pelicans, shockingly, and the Thunder themselves. Yes, the Thunder already meet the equation to become a championship team with the 3rd best offensive rating and the 7th best defensive rating in the entire NBA. Like I said, the current roster already has deep playoff run written all over them. But there are 2 moves that will give OKC everything they need to win at the highest level and compete with championship-ready teams like the Celtics. And the best part is, these are actually realistic targets. Obviously, the Thunder don't want to lean too much one way when it comes to offense and defensive capabilities, because they're so good at both right now. So they need players that can improve their rating on both sides of the ball, which is rare but not unheard of. The first player that is literally a no-brainer for this team to make a move for is none other than Jerami Grant. Grant is literally the definition of a 3-and-D wing that the Thunder could start over Josh Giddey. Grant can lock down on defense when needed and is shooting over 41% from 3 on 5.5 attempts per game. For context, there are only 8 players shooting better from 3 at higher volume, those being James Harden, Paul George, Luke Kennard, Dante DiVincenzo, Brunson, McCollum, Beasley, and Grayson Allen. Pretty much all of these guys are great, but aside from Grayson Allen and maybe Paul George, Grant is the best defender in this group by a mile, and the Thunder could easily make a move for him. The Trailblazers are going nowhere with their current roster, and they need to do what the Thunder did in 2019. Cash in any chips that are helping them win games right now and fully blow up their team. So why not trade Grant to the Thunder for a few first-round picks this year and maybe some young talent like Josh Giddey or Poku? The Thunder trio of Shai, J-Dub, and Chet are already all averaging nearly 20 points per game. So just imagine the offensive leap if they got Grant, who's also averaging 21 points per game. Obviously, his production on the offensive end would go down a bit because the Thunder have way more talent than Portland, but the defense alone validates this move for OKC. I mean, just look at the last 3-and-D player who was traded in OG Anunoby. The Knicks instantly took a leap despite giving up great young talent in Quickley and Barrett. And I can almost guarantee the same would be for OKC. Grant is also locked in on a contract until 2028, so he would be locked into place for this Thunder core and help them win for the next 5, 6, maybe even 7 years down the road if they extend him. But that's not where it ends for this team, because there's one more young star player that would undoubtedly give OKC the best starting lineup in the entire league and possibly solidify them as a dynasty for the next 5 years. Some people have talked about Kevin Durant going back to OKC, others have discussed guys like Donovan Mitchell, but I feel like no one is talking about Lauri Markkanen. The Jazz are in the same situation as the Blazers. They need to pull the plug on their best players and start building for the future. Lucky for the Thunder, Markkanen is on the timeline of Shai and would be a perfect fit for this Thunder roster. Don't believe me? Let's look at the film. Markkanen is everything that this team needs. He can make cuts and give Shai easy passes for easy buckets. He can take advantage of matchups against smaller forwards in the paint or stretch the floor against big men. And maybe most importantly, he can run the transition and get easy second chance buckets on missed shots. People may not think of him as an elite defender, but his defensive rating of 116 this season, which is similar to guys like Jimmy Butler, Kevin Durant, and Draymond Green, would say otherwise. Lauri seems like he could be the piece that completes the Thunder puzzle, especially if paired with Jerami Grant on the wing as well. So yes, the Thunder do have a problem. All the assets they've stowed away are starting to be too much for this team. But lucky for them, they can turn this problem into one of the best young cores in the entire NBA, and maybe even create a dynasty if they play their cards right. But there is another young player who is so good that he might be the next face of the NBA in no time. Anthony Edwards has officially taken the superstar leap, and how he did it is honestly pretty surprising. Click here to watch and see why Ant-Man could be the next face of the NBA.